Hello comrades, so let's continue our review of another car from the collection. Legendary Soviet cars in 1/24 scale from the company Shit Collection. Why was I delayed for so long? Well, thanks to Russian Post, it lets us Russians down a little bit. Well, just a little bit. In today's video, we're reviewing a unique vehicle that in many ways was the first in the automotive history of the Soviet Union. This is the LuAZ-969 Volyn, although personally for me, the Volyn, it's probably the very first model, the 969, with a flat front, painted in a white finish. It actually looks just like a vintage little ZIL 130 truck. Well, it looks very similar. Because at that time, in fact, again, it's certainly no secret to anyone, there was a unified Soviet design school, and they aimed to design cars in a very unified style. Moreover, the entire history of the creation of the USSR originally began in 1956. It was a joint creative effort at the MI and Erbiscu motorcycle plant. The first prototypes turned out to be quite unsuccessful. A fiberglass body, a motorcycle engine. In general, in my opinion, it was complete nonsense. But probably for people at that time, it was experimenters. That's how it seems to me too. Then there was the Zaporozhye version, but who asked for it to be developed? Naturally, the army. Here, nothing happens without the army. The very best was always given to the army in the Soviet Union. But in this case, the army vehicle very successfully transitioned into a civilian off-road vehicle. Why do I say that the LuAZ-969 was the first in many respects? I will explain that right now. To begin with, the LuAZ-969 was the first front-wheel drive Soviet car. That's an incredibly strange paradox and something of a complete nonsense. They lacked time to connect the rear-wheel drive. The Melitopol plant couldn't produce rear differentials in time. That's all there is to it. But there's one more thing. This is a vehicle that served an agricultural purpose. That was its designation. Drive to the rear axle. At the time when the vehicle was front-wheel drive, it acted as a PTO, a power takeoff shaft. Accordingly, agricultural equipment could be attached to it. And in the future, the power takeoff shaft became the drive for the rear-wheel drive. The drive for the rear-wheel drive. Well, something like that. Production of these vehicles began in 1979, after lengthy tests and struggles over who would manufacture this vehicle. At first, it was planned to produce it at ZAZ, because it was the 969 model that, in a series of subsequent upgrades, was developed directly with the Zaporizhzhia automobile plant, but it was the LuAZ automobile plant that was allowed to produce it, which at that time was, as we would say today, part of the ZAZ group of companies. This included the Melitopol plant, the Zaporizhzhia plant, and accordingly the LuAZ plant, even though all of them were merely enterprises for repairing agricultural machinery. Well, that's just how it was in the Soviet Union. First, a facility for repairing agricultural machinery, and then an automobile plant. And there are plenty of examples of that. But let's take a look. Of course, the model car is in 1/24 scale. The body is made using a specific technology. And I can already hear you mouthing the words, saying that word. With the LuAZ, it's actually quite hard not to work out all the fine details, because it's very tall and features a very prominent suspension system. It's a unique torsion suspension, and right here you can see it perfectly well. Seriously, to put it another way, the further Ashet company goes in manufacturing vehicles, the more meticulous they become. They work out the details more thoroughly, because it's necessary. Yes, the rear and front axles are of course made of plastic materials, but we can clearly see every single detail. We can see the frame, we can see the torsion suspension, we can see the suspension arms, we can see the shock absorbers, and the drives to the wheels through the differentials. Yes, we can see just how incredibly flat the bottom of the car is. And it was precisely this absolutely crucial and decisive factor that allowed this remarkable engineering creation from the city of Lutsk to be practically the best off-roader in the Soviet Union. Believe it or not, even before mass production began, the LuAZ-969M received high praise at the VDNH Central Exhibition of Achievements of the National Economy. In 1978, at the International Auto Show in Turin, it was ranked among the top 10 off-road vehicles in Europe. I emphasize in Europe. In 1979, at the International Exhibition in the city of České Budějovice, the LuAZ, it received a gold medal as one of the best vehicles for rural residents. Next, the top is made of plastic, all the windows are done just right, the rear section and the tailgate are well designed, it folds down, and there's a license plate light. there is even, as you can clearly see here, a thin little wire running somewhere deep down below the surface. The spare tire is excellent, though it's unclear who would need LuAZ tires. No, actually, it's clear who needs it. It's needed for the Ulyanovsk, oh my goodness, sorry. It's needed for the LuAZ vehicle and for the power tiller and the mini tractor. I forgot what it's called. You can see the footrests. The fuel tank neck is very clearly visible and accessible, and the entire rear lighting assembly. Even the fastenings on the top are well detailed. If you look inside the cabin, you can clearly see the dashboard. It's the later, more bloated version. The steering column has Zhiguli switches, standardization, and again, Zhiguli seats from the Kopeka model. Well, that's because later on they started installing Zhiguli seats. In the back, you can also see 2 additional separate Zhiguli seats. Well, since this is a 2-door car, specifically 2-door, not 3-door. Being a 2-door car, access to the rear row was provided by folding the seat forward. The mechanism is more than strange, but it is what it is. The shapes of the car are still an echo of military technology. This is a TPK, and the LuAZ was originally developed as a TPK. Frontline transporter, where the driver sat in the middle. That's why these angular shapes have remained. What else? Another interesting thing to note, the engine protection is clearly visible from the front. This is because there's a Zaporozhets engine installed here, and air is forcibly drawn in through the radiator grille. By the way, that's exactly why the Zaporozhets engine actually feels much better in the UAZ than it ever did in its original cars, specifically the original models of the Zaporozhets. Also, the safety handles are a later addition. Vent windows with a chrome frame. There's only a mirror on the left. There's even a mirror inside the cabin. At the front, there's the wiper mechanism. Well, that's a whole other story. But on the other hand, let's remember that this is a military vehicle. At the front, there's the inscription LuAZ, right here on the grille, on the front panel. The detailing is pretty good. I really like it, especially if you look at it from all sides. Quality. Well, the quality is nice. The rubber is actually rubber, with that distinctive LuAZ tread pattern. Even here, look, there's an eyelet for the hand crank starter. It's a small thing, but it's nice. A little detail. As for obvious flaws, well, of course, you professionals will definitely find some flaws. Well, how could there not be any flaws? Come on, guys. But overall, it's really not bad. The only thing I would probably... What would I do differently? Yeah, actually, I wouldn't change a thing. I like everything here. Absolutely everything. Even the little folds, if you look closely, there are some at the back from the tension of the tarp. You see, these little playful details, there's no other way to call them. These realistic touches, they add a certain kind of eroticism, in the best sense of the word. Take a look. You can see, look how the fastenings are showing through the surface of the tarp. Here you have these, how should I put it, posts. Not really posts, but you can see them here. Even the creators noted this detail. There are loops, they're for laying the windshield forward, and here on the military modifications, there used to be little hooks. But here, they're not present, and that's been taken into account as well. So basically, you lay the windshield down and secure it with little hooks, like on the LuAZ-969. But there are loops and no hooks. That's correct. Yes, the entire upper section is plastic, while the bottom portion is solid metal material. Everything is completely honest and straightforward. In the LuAZ car, there are exactly 4 seats, no 5th seat. There are 4 seats, whether you like it or not. This is a lightweight car, truly a microcar, a mini compact. It weighs only 960 kilograms with a total weight of 1,360 kilograms. And its overall dimensions, I have to say, are very small. The length is 3.385 meters and the width is just over 1.5 meters. The ground clearance is a particular point of pride. The LuAZ has 280 millimeters. That's an honest measurement without any protruding bolts or shock absorber mounts. As I already mentioned, the engine is a MZ. It's a Zaporozhets, a 4-stroke, 4-cylinder, carbureted, V-shaped, air-cooled engine. But it also produces 40 horsepower at 4,000 RPM. Displacement? Well, everyone says 1,200, but it's actually 1,197 cc. It has 4-wheel drum brakes with hydraulic drive. Steering is via worm gear, and the front suspension is independent torsion bar on trailing arms with shocks. The rear suspension is also independent, also torsion bar, also on longitudinal arms with shock absorbers. The maximum speed is 85 kilometers per hour. But at 70, it already starts to feel scary. Acceleration to 100. Impossible. in my opinion, is a very good little car, and again, the scale is correct, 1:24, so you can really see everything. But again, this is a story about part works from the company Hachette Collection and their legendary Soviet cars. In particular, the 1/24 scale collection wouldn't be complete without mentioning the glossy magazine. This time it is entirely dedicated to the UAZ. And of course, there's a story about the cargo passenger UAZ in general, but the last two articles will be especially interesting. Volyn, an off-road vehicle for rural areas, about its creation, about the history of the car. And finally, the last article is directly about the LuAZ automobile plant in Ukraine. Here, I want to emphasize again that the LuAZ plant was not an independent, separate enterprise. As I have already mentioned, it was part of Automotive. Study it, read it. A small announcement, immediately, as soon as we touch the magazine. In issue 34, you will see. Now I'll show you what you see. Here she is, the classic GAZ 2410 Volga, and you will be the first to see it. Yes, it just so happened that I received it very, very quickly. Accordingly, in a week I will release reviews specifically on the 24th Volga regarding the contest. The May holidays are over, and everyone who won in the previous episode, in the one before that, I remember everyone, and I will send out gifts to all of you within the next few weeks. Gifts. And I'll even send a gift to the one who guessed what kind of antlers are on the wall. Those are the horns of an ancient bison, which is between 10,000 and 30,000 years old. That's how it is. And now it started to rain outside the window. There is no such thing as bad weather. Don't listen to that. Moving on. Well, before I say goodbye, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to the collector's edition of the legendary Soviet cars in 1:24 scale by calling the hotline number you see at the bottom of the screen, or by following the link to the website, which is in the description below. Let me remind you that with each issue of the legendary Soviet cars, the print run is getting smaller, and it will keep getting smaller and smaller. So hurry up, comrades. Basically, the model cars are very good. Well, it's time to say goodbye. Let me remind you that I will send out all the gifts as promised. I'll come up with a more difficult contest. If you have any thoughts or ideas about what other contests to hold, write them in the comments. Well, that's probably all, my little nephews. Good luck to you.